welcome back to another episode of College Football on Tap. I'm back with Ross here. Ross, how you feeling, man?
I love the long weekend, man.
Yeah.
It's been so good that today got to sleep in a little. Yesterday got to sleep in a little bit. Today woke up and was like, oh, I still got like 2 more days of this.
Yeah, this is actually one of the few weekends where my job actually gives me the long weekend. I don't really get off for any other holidays. Like we got off for the 4th of July this year, but for the most part, I don't know how Christmas and New Year's work. It's only my second year there, but last year I worked Christmas Day, so my hopes are not too high in terms of it being in the middle of the week. But it was nice to have a long weekend so far this week because normally this right here doing College Football on Tap is kind of like the start of my weekend because I kind of rush everything on Friday where I bowl on Friday nights and whatnot. And it's like sleep, go bowl, and then I'm still tired and going in the next day. So College Football on Tap is the beginning of my weekend normally. So it's nice that I've already had 2 days of rest and relaxation on top of that.
Yep.
But here we are. Yeah, like we already had a nice little Black Friday slate yesterday with Georgia and Georgia Tech capping it off there. 8 overtimes. I mean, I know it's new rules. I kind of prefer the old rules in terms of college football, in terms of what would happen if you go into 3 overtimes and then you have to go for 2 at that point. I think this whole kind of rushing it, making it go back and forth with the 2-point conversions back and forth, it's fun. It's like a shootout in hockey, but it's also just not the best of ways to end a game, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, it was fun to watch. I mean, both teams were scoring on each other when the other team scored. Both teams were playing defense on each other team when the other team stepped up and made a play on defense. Georgia ultimately coming away with it in a game that, honestly, if they lost, it would just make the SEC title game that much more confusing, especially if a Texas A&M won today. So in a way, I'm kind of just happy Georgia came away with it, just to like not make my brain have to work harder than it already is with how confusing a lot of this college football playoff stuff is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is it's still open today for like. I mean, if you go back to actual Thanksgiving, you had Memphis go and knock off Tulane, which was already putting people's mind in a pretzel of like, how does this happen now? Like, what works now? And I mean, look at yesterday's game, a week too little, too late for Colorado. Like,
yeah.
If Colorado had won last week and then did that again yesterday, what they did, you'd be a lot of people would be circling and penciling them like that's one to watch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, there is still a path for Colorado to get into the Big 12 title game, which we could go into in a little bit here because I'm kind of excited to break it all down because I had to sit there this morning and just kind of be like, wait, how does the Big 12 title game work? Who's got the best shot at getting in here? It's all very up in the air over there. So I had to kind of take notes and really get into it just so I actually knew what I was talking about when it came to it, just because there's a possibility, like it says, like technically there's 9 teams that could possibly play in it, but really it's only 6 teams that could possibly do it based off of all the math that there is. And that's ultimately going to decide who's the number 12 seed. It's going to decide who, like right now, would probably play Ohio State. But that's all depending on what happens in these conference championship games next week. So there's a lot to jam pack in here, like really quick with all this.
No, definitely. I mean, it's going to be an exciting day to post up on the couch and watch it all the chaos break down because we really don't know. There are still open paths where we already saw last week how everything was kind of sealed and we had an idea of what it looked like. And by the end of the day, it was like, I don't know what it looks like anymore.
Yeah. I mean, even yesterday, like just watching Boise State play against Oregon State, I was just trying to think, Oregon State had a big win. They won the Pac-12 last week. They, there was 2 teams in the Pac-12 this year, and one of them had a win, and it ended up being Oregon State, despite them now not being able to go to a bowl game. But they still won the Pac-12, so congratulations to them. But I kind of thought Oregon State kind of had a shot yesterday against Boise State. I honestly did. I was interested to see how they came out, and Boise State was the better team, but it's still not the most impressive looking team. And me and you were talking off air beforehand, like kind of interested to see how Ashton Genty looks against whoever they end up getting in the second round, which right now would be the winner of Ohio State and the Big 12 champion. So, which that's going to change, obviously, most likely, I think. But they, in general, like they handled Oregon State. They looked good, but I just don't know what it's going to look like when they have to go against one of these bigger schools.
I mean, that's the thing that we have. I mean, they're kind of setting the precedent for what we would expect as like a mid-major school coming in and getting a higher seed. I mean, that we're going to realistically find out right away out of the gate first year what this format sets up and how a school like Boise State does if they sneak in and grab that 4 seed. Because obviously, they're going to get the bye, and then how do they match up with a higher talented team potentially? Also, a team that's already played. I think that's one thing to take into consideration is getting that off week. Is do you make the most of it and do you come back strong, or do you come sluggish out of the gate and the team that just already had to play for their life last week is firing on all cylinders? Is that trouble?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I mean, it's so separated because the first round games are December 19th and 20th, I believe. I think there's a Friday game and then 3 Saturday games is the way that they break it down. And then everybody else plays like that New Year's Eve, New Year's Day kind of slate when you get into that. So there's a long layoff there in general. That's like 3-4 weeks after they play their conference championship game. And that's another thing. Boise State still has to get through their conference championship game. And a loss there, then it does fall into the next team in line, which with Tulane losing would be possibly a UNLV. Like we might see UNLV, the team that lost their starting quarterback and their starting running back at the beginning of the year because of NIL deals. Like that's a crazy story that could possibly happen because of all that there still is to do with the last week of the regular season and how these conference championships really might end up affecting all this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't really know. The door's still wide open for so many things to change.
And with that, I mean, we'll kind of break down the games of the day, but we'll talk about this Big 12 scenario first, just because there is so much to the Big 12 right now, and they are an automatic bid, going to be the 12th seed most likely, depending on how Boise State handles things next week. They could still end up being a 4 seed if Boise State ended up losing next week, so that's something to look out for. But the way that this breaks down pretty much is there's still a possibility for 6 teams in general to kind of go into this Big 12 championship game, with the most likely scenario being Arizona State versus Iowa State. The thing with that is, which I know we're about to get into with you, Ross, because we kind of talked about it off air, is who Iowa State plays today. And this isn't a matter of if there's a 4-way tie, because if there's a 4-way tie going into at the end of this week, the championship game will be Arizona State versus Iowa State. And that's considering all these teams end up winning, which is Colorado, Arizona State, which Colorado already won yesterday, BYU, and Iowa State. So a championship game right now, most likely Arizona State versus Iowa State. But Iowa State has a tough opponent today in Kansas State. Ross, I know you have some thoughts on this.
On my card today, I do have Kansas State taking Iowa State down. I don't ask me what the vibe is or where I came to that full conclusion. I've just looked at it so many times and just been like, this seems like that game that Kansas State is going to put together and take it down in Ames.
I looked at this game too, and I'm kind of ended up deciding that I'm gonna bet today in segments. So there was 5 games that I actually liked at the 11 a.m. slate, and I don't know if it's just because it's rivalry week or what. Um, but it's there was 5 games I liked, so I'm kind of breaking it down later. But I was looking at this game in itself, and I don't like betting the Big 12. What's up, Wes? Uh, um, I don't like betting the Big 12 because it's just such a wonky conference. And as you can see with the situation that we're in, it's the wonkiest of conferences. Um, but yeah, Kansas State, like they've had weird games. They had a disappointing game earlier in the year with BYU when we thought BYU might be a juggernaut that's going to run through the Big 12, and then obviously the last 3 weeks have happened and BYU has struggled. And Arizona State, the team that was projected to be in last place in this conference at the beginning of the year, is now looking at going to a Big 12 title game and favorite possibly to go to the college football playoff. I mean, it's just crazy. So I'm staying away from it betting wise, but I do understand like you kind of get that game every year where Kansas State just puts it all together. It's the end of the season. There's a lot on the line. I could definitely see Kansas State putting it together today.
Kansas State is that program that for whatever reason, every single year you see them be like number 11 or 12 in like week 5 through 8, and you're like, oh, they're going to lose, right? And then you see them at like number 24 at the end of the year, you're like, oh, for sure they're going to win that game. I don't know what that vibe is. It's just the vibe they always have. It's just the beginning of the year when they're high up in the ranking, you just know they're going down at some point. And then the end of the year when you see them hanging on, you're like, oh, they're good enough. They'll probably put this together today.
Yeah, I was just looking at their schedule, and they've lost 2 out of their last 3. One of those being a loss against Houston, which is kind of where they fell off from any type of conversation in terms of the Big 12 championship game. And then last week they handled Cincinnati quite handily. So they come back out here today in a game that is much bigger for Iowa State than it is for them. And I could definitely see them really having like I think especially when you have that idea of like being able to go and upset especially a rival's season, stop them from going to a playoff, you're going to be more up for it than ever. So I could see Kansas State definitely putting it together, but definitely a game I'm going to stay away from just because like I said, Big 12 wonkiness. The only team that I like right now in the Big 12 is a team that's like 5-6, and that's Kansas. So
Yeah, I mean, this falls into that category again, where for Kansas State, this is like their Super Bowl game.
yeah,
That this is the game you have to make noise and carry over into next year with some momentum. So yeah, it took a lot for me to put it on the card, but I wanted some late action on my card, something to keep me occupied into the evening because a lot of it is earlier afternoon slate. I needed something for the evening, so that was my pick, and we'll just hold our breath and see how that goes.
I still haven't put anything on the game yet with Michigan and Ohio State, which I think this is one of the weirdest like Michigan versus Ohio State games ever because nobody's talking about it. I mean, it's just not being talked about like it normally would be this time of year. And I know it's because Michigan's on a down year, but even when Michigan was having down years in the past, this game was still always talked about at a high end. And it's just kind of gone in the background, and I think you have to chalk that up to the college football playoff being what it is, and that being most important. And I kind of just to go back into like where we were with the Big 12 and how it all breaks down. Arizona State, their game today could end up causing us to have to watch the night game tonight that starts at 9:15 with BYU and Houston. Because if Arizona State ends up losing, this is the case of scenario if there's a 3-way tie going on. BYU would end up playing in a bowl game or in a Big 12 championship against Iowa State with an Arizona State loss. That's pretty simple to follow. Iowa State loses, you get Arizona State versus BYU. Still very simple to follow. So, likely scenario, Iowa State and Arizona State win. They play each other. One of those teams loses. BYU takes the place of either of those teams that loses. Next possibility where things get a little bit weirder, but it stays the same in terms of what is the general concept in terms of Arizona State versus Iowa State. If BYU loses and West Virginia wins, then we still get Arizona State versus Iowa State. Now, the very end, which is how Colorado finds their way back into the situation and possibly gives Travis Hunter his clinching moment for the Heisman just by going to the Big 12 title game. But a lot has to happen. First scenario is BYU loses, Texas Tech wins, Baylor wins, Cincinnati win. That would make Colorado versus Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. Other scenario, which just the math makes, this is where the math just kind of confuses me with what I just said. A BYU loss, a Texas Tech win, and a Baylor or Cincinnati loss. Not both of them, just one of them. Colorado versus Iowa State yet again. Iowa State has the easiest path here with all the craziness out of anyone. But the idea of what Colorado could possibly be cheering for today, it's just like it's so much to follow if you're a Big 12 fan or just a fan of college football in general. This is going to be absolutely insane to see because these games tend to come down to the final minutes in the Big 12, no matter who the hell's playing who.
This is like the scenario where Colorado's sitting in like the team in like the team headquarters and has like the octo box going.
Yeah, absolutely. But the way that it works out, it's like this BYU game, BYU playing Houston tonight could end up being something that decides who's in the Big 12 championship game. That game doesn't start until 9:15 at night. So we're going to get, I think the Iowa State, Kansas State game's a 6:30 start. So that game's going to start rolling into that. And BYU won't even know if they're playing for something that matters yet at that point, which that's crazy. I mean, it's just the way that the Big 12 is going to shape up and how we're going to see who goes to the championship game. It could be very bland. It could just be Arizona State beating up on Arizona, which I think is going to happen. But that Iowa State Kansas State game, that's wide open. These scenarios with West Virginia playing Texas Tech mattering, and just because there's so many teams, they're all bunched up with each other. Who knows what happens in those games? Those are all going to be very tight football games that could go either way. If you look at the spreads, like I know West Virginia, Texas Tech is like a 2.5 or something. And just the way the Big 12 is, I mean, we've seen, like we already mentioned, BYU blew out Kansas State 37-9 or something earlier this year. And then BYU loses to Arizona State by 10 or, keeps it close with them. And it's all over the place.
So I guess one thing I'd like to get your opinion on is, isn't it a little crazy that there is this huge scenario over in the Big 12, but this equally happens in the SEC, but it's because the SEC with the teams that are playing all the big programs involved, it's equally exciting when you go over the Big 12, and the Big 12 has an automatic bid to, basically built in. It's just kind of crazy, like the discrepancy between how big the SEC competition is and everyone goes nuts over it. And it's like, there's a whole nother conference over here that, yes, does it have main draws anymore like it did? No, but like equally it has a huge impact, just like everything else does. Like that, it's a wild scenario that half the league is playing for something today over on that side and can have an effect at what the final standing looks like.
Yeah, I mean, and it's absolutely. I mean, the way that they the way that everything is with the SEC in general. I mean, I don't know if I agree with it. A lot of it, I don't know if a lot of it could even be that they're kind of having a down year, possibly, and they're all just beating up on each other. Because I mean, every time I watch Georgia, I'm having a hard time finding where I'm impressed anymore. At the beginning of the year, when they first had that game against Clemson, I was like, "Holy shit, these guys are fast!" And yeah, their defense is still fine, but they gave up 40 points to Georgia Tech yesterday. Notre Dame handled Georgia Tech, and like no one wanted to give Notre Dame credit for Georgia Tech. And now it's just like, oh, Georgia could hardly even. Georgia almost basically. Georgia should have lost to Georgia Tech yesterday. Didn't happen. They ended up winning, but Georgia's going to get all the credit in the world for something like that. Still, no matter what, because they're Georgia and they're in the SEC. And it's wild that this whole entire conference between Auburn playing Alabama today, that really does it matter? Should it matter as much as it does with the way Alabama's lost this year? I don't know. But they don't have to play an SEC title game, so they're very lucky. They win today, they're probably going to get in. And it's not that way for all these other teams in, like, say, the ACC that's might be a little stronger than what people think. And on these Big 12 teams, like, you have the 10-1 SMU, you have the 9-2 BYU, you have these teams that are all 10-1 and 9-2, going to finish the year 11-1, going to a conference championship game, going to 10-2, and they're not going to get that same credit, and they're going to end up being a 12 seed because none of them dominated the conference. I don't.
Yeah, I just wanted your opinion that it's crazy. I think how much love one conference gets when I think there's equally talented teams in other conferences, just with how comparative all the teams are becoming. I mean, look at the SEC. The SEC is building already this year where they're all beating up on each other because they all have equal talent.
Well, and that's something right now with the college football playoff, the way that the rankings are shaping up today, and the way that it most likely is going to end up looking. We're going to get an SEC versus SEC first round matchup. I sit there and I watch the way Colorado played yesterday, and maybe they're not the most deserving, but they're a fun team to watch. I would love to see Colorado play Tennessee. I think that would be a fun game to watch. I mean, I would like to see what happens even between, like, I don't think Miami's that great. I think SMU is going to end up beating Miami when it all comes down to it. But if Miami does beat SMU and SMU's a 2-loss team and they're not going to be in because of the conference and all that stuff, but it's just like I kind of like to see an SMU versus Ohio State just to see what the comparison is instead of like getting the games that we're most likely going to see because the conferences are so lopsided. I mean, we're looking at Penn State versus Indiana. Like, I don't really want to see that. I don't care to see that. I don't need to see the conferences play each other in this situation, but because they're so favored, that's what we're going to end up seeing a lot of, I think.
Yeah.
So that kind of breaks down like how we're going to end up finishing with the Big 12 there. And I mean, that's going to decide basically probably one seed total. And it's going to be that 12 spot that if we were going by actual rankings, Clemson would hold right now, which is very interesting when you think about it, because they're a 2-loss Clemson team who's playing South Carolina today, and probably one of the bigger games of the day. That's an 11 a.m. game because South Carolina, 3-loss South Carolina team might actually be in the playoff with a win today, just because with 3 losses. It's crazy to think about because there's so much that's going to break down between the conference championships next week and what happens the rest of the day today.
Yeah, I actually went I believe South Carolina.
I did too. I picked South Carolina to win this game. They've seemed to have the ability to get up for these bigger games. And I just brought it up, Georgia versus Clemson earlier this year. SEC defense and that Clemson offense has been struggling. They've had a lot of injuries this year. I think that they're getting a couple of guys back, but still, it's been a tough year for them injured wise. Even though they had that streak where they were looking so impressive, and we were all just sitting there like, "Oh, sorry, Clemson, like sorry for disrespecting you," and we were all betting them every week, and then they had their dud game, and they haven't been that same team since. I think today's going to be a very close game, but overall, it's going to be South Carolina running away with it late because they're just going to tire them out, and I just think they're going to be the bigger, faster, physical team. I kind of really like the number that we got on that game too. Clemson being favorited, so I took South Carolina on the money line just because I just think Clemson's getting a little bit of love just for being at home.
Yeah, and I actually had the exact same thought that South Carolina defense is really, really coming around late. And this just, every way I looked at it, this just feels like that game that they're going to cause too much trouble up front. And it's giving me that vibe that they're going to pull ahead late, and it's going to be just too little too late for Clemson to really get anything done. Their defense is just going to play well enough to put them in that spot at the end of the game, and you're going to need that last drive, whatever. And I just think the defense will stand tall at the end of the game and hold it.
Well, and that's what I saw with I mean, I know it was week 1 of the season, and it was back in August, and we've come a long way since then. But you saw how fast Georgia was compared to Clemson on offense, and I mean, even Phil Maffa, he's a great running back, but I don't know if he could really sit there and handle all of this on his own because he does have to carry a lot of the weight there for Clemson. And when he's had to sit there and take on these higher end defenses, his offensive line hasn't been there for him. He's not rushing for the amount of yards per game that he would have. And it just looked like when they played against Georgia, they looked like children. They looked like they were so much faster. South Carolina is going to be very similar. And I think that we're going to see South Carolina just be way too fast for Clemson today. And as much as I was kind of like liking what Clemson was doing, and I'm not a big Clemson guy, I'm a Notre Dame fan. Like, you know, I obviously don't like Clemson, but I was coming around to what Clemson was doing this year. And now I just kind of got that negative feeling, and I'm not feeling good about their chances today. I think they find a way to keep it close. They're well coached. They're good enough. But at the end of the day, I still think it's a double digit win at the end of the day for South Carolina.
Yeah, it's the vibe I was getting, and I think it's just going to be. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be a hard fought game. I just think South Carolina is going to get just enough, like, you know, a 10 or so point lead holding late in the fourth, and it's going to be Clemson having to do something kind of drastic and big, and South Carolina just standing tall.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm interested in this game. I think it's going to be the main one that I'm paying attention to in terms of these 11 a.m. starts that really implicate things. I mean, I'll, of course, watch Michigan, Ohio State for a little bit, but I'm not even, like I said, I don't even know if I'm going to bet it or anything. I like Michigan getting 20 points. I think that they'll try and keep it closer than that, but I think there's a lot of retribution that Ryan Day wants to get for how his career against Michigan has went. So,
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he's going to try to bury that and claim, look, we finally did it. Did you see Ryan Day's wild speech at the beginning of the year?
Yeah.
Or beginning of this week? The losing to Michigan last year is the worst thing that happened to me. Well, that, and when I was 9 and my dad died. Wild.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That is just, I literally was at my desk at work, and I, like, in the nicest way possible, I, like, giggled, like, the fact that I had to reread that quote several times. that just losing to Michigan last year was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Well, that, and when I was 9 and my dad died.
Yeah, that's quite a quote. Well, you know, if he lost to Michigan today, then they might be talking about firing his ass. So it's
Yeah, I would say that would be the one.
yeah, this would be a rough one for them to swallow. And I did see that Michigan's star corner Will Johnson's going to be out today, so that's kind of sad to see.
Yeah, I think I did get a little boost on this game, and I'm
I
pretty
got
sure
one too.
I just hammered Ohio State.
I might do some touchdowns with it. Normally, I do touchdowns with Ohio State because Egbuka always gets at me a touchdown, and then I always pick the wrong guy between Judkins and Henderson. Which running back's going to have the better day? I've been picking Judkins for weeks, and he hasn't scored in a while, so I think I'm just going to go with Henderson so Judkins can score and shove it up me. But
Yeah, I mean that obviously that's what's going to happen now.
absolutely. Other game that's in this 11 a.m. slate that really implicates the college football playoff. And I think it's a very interesting game because it's a team that spoiled a lot of teams so far this year. And they've been very fun to watch out of the SEC. We got Tennessee versus Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt. Big rivalry game. Can Vanderbilt do it one more time for us?
I stayed away from this game.
I did take Vandy on the spread because they were getting 10.5 at home. And I'm just like,
And I will let you know, since I did look at that this morning for a real long time. And then I took like a 15-minute break to think about it. And when I came back, it had already dropped to like 10. And then that was my, all right, I'm done. I'm out. That
I
I looked at that 10.5 for a while. I thought about it. And by the time I went back and was like, all right, it had already dropped. And I was like, all right, I'm out. Never mind. That was my sign.
Yeah, I understand that. That's how I normally am with bets too when I look at them, and then if that's dropping, it's like, well, the money's going the other way now, so maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. Tennessee's offense at the beginning of the year that's all everyone was talking about is how high powered and how they were just going to roll through teams this whole season with their crazy offense. Well, the offense has been fine, but it hasn't been insane. They struggled against Georgia 2 weeks ago. They were able to put up 56 against UTEP last week, but that's what they're supposed to do. Vanderbilt's done a great job of keeping every game close, making everybody work to beat them. They took out Alabama this year. They want that one more rivalry victory, and I really hope to see it because just like Penn State to me, I don't want to see Tennessee in the college football playoff anymore. I'm just not impressed. From what I thought they were at the beginning of the season, it's just, I'd like to see Vanderbilt knock them out, and I like we were just talking, I want some new flavor in there. Try and get some of these SEC schools out of there, even though I know the next teams up are more SEC schools.
Yeah, I'm a little opposite where I think I'd like to see a classic program like Tennessee and get in and be playing for something late in the year. But I really can't decide either way because Vanderbilt has been my team I've ridden with all year. And then we're going to come to the final week, and this is the big game, big implications. And I think I'm abstaining. I think I'm just going to enjoy a nice afternoon football game and not hitch my wagon to anything.
Yeah, no, and that's completely fine. And I wish I would do that more often. But I mean, if I would have did that yesterday and just enjoyed the fact that Brock Bowers was on 3 of my fantasy teams and not hoping for Kelsey to catch a touchdown too, I would have had a great time just watching Brock Bowers destroy the afternoon. But I decided to lose money on it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Vanderbilt sit there like they're an odd team because they've been able to sit there and win some of these crazy big games, and then they lose games like a couple of weeks ago they lost to South Carolina, and in a bad way. South Carolina made them look bad. Kind of reason why I'm kind of big on South Carolina today is because no one's really made Vanderbilt look bad. Vandy last week, they almost had LSU, but kept it within 7. I think that it's going to be hard for Tennessee to go out there and cover a 10.5 point spread with Vandy at least, let alone win the game. I think it's going to come down to it's going to be a late one again where we're watching the final minutes and we're seeing where Tennessee's season ends up, if they're going to be a college football playoff team or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's put up or shut up time, so we're gonna see where it falls.
Outside of that, in terms of that 11 a.m. slate, there's nothing else that really implicates that college football playoff. Obviously, we talked a little bit about Michigan, Ohio State, but not much else to say there. I think it's going to be Ohio State's day. Afternoon slate, obviously we have the Iron Bowl. We have Alabama, Auburn. Alabama on the outside looking in right now, but it looks like they're the next team up depending on what happens in Clemson, South Carolina. Alabama win, and they're probably in somehow again.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know how else to look at it. It's honestly, it's just at that point where Alabama and that SEC bias that we kind of highlighted early on. It's there. It's alive. Granted, Alabama's had a tough schedule this year, but they do have a loss against Vanderbilt, who overall, despite being tough, they are 6-5. Likely 6-6 at the end of the day. I'd like them to be 7-5, but likely 6-6 at the end of the year.
Do you think Vanderbilt has any implications today if South Carolina takes down Clemson? Do you think that the fact that South Carolina and Alabama, do you think Vanderbilt has any implications there? For that's obviously Alabama's loss. South Carolina took care of business against them.
Do you mean like in terms of what they mean in terms of everybody else's standings inside the playoffs?
Yeah, because I mean, I know Alabama beat South Carolina, but it's a 2-point game. Alabama loses to Vanderbilt, but South Carolina beats Vanderbilt, nicely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I honestly, that's something that I wanted it to be taken into effect in general. Said it earlier with Notre Dame and Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and Georgia. It's one of those things where I want to see how this ends up ultimately breaking down because of those facts of how these teams played against each other. And I don't know if the college football playoff has been taking that into effect yet because we haven't seen any changes in terms of teams jumping each other with getting impressive wins. And like we tend to see in the normal like AP coaches poll, whatnot throughout the season, we normally see these teams jump each other when they're more impressive in terms of the victories. It happened at the end of last season with Florida State because they had injuries. They didn't think they were impressive anymore. All that, does everything come to full effect instead of just like what they're seeing right now and just keeping it easy? Because I think a part of it, excuse me, is that they keep it easy. They're keeping it easy on themselves until they don't have.
So just the way I'm looking at when I'm reviewing the two schedules between the two. Yes, Alabama beat South Carolina head to head, right? When I look comparatively at the two schedules over the past several weeks, South Carolina is the better team, in my opinion, here. That, yes, Alabama's higher in the ranking, but if South Carolina takes down Clemson, it only adds on to the record and the streak that they've been on lately, where I think that what have you done for me lately resume, South Carolina's is better than Alabama's.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm right there with you. And I think that should be definitely be taken into account. And I honestly don't know where the college football playoff committee stands in terms of these facts yet. Because all you hear about like in terms of Notre Dame is Notre Dame's good. They lost to NIU though. They lost to Northern Illinois. So that's what we're gonna sit there and think. And what does that mean come the actual selection day? Alabama's great. Alabama's Alabama, but they lost to Vanderbilt. And South Carolina beat Vanderbilt easily. What does that mean when one's a 3-loss team? Like what does it come down to? South Carolina has more impressive victories. Alabama, like they're both 3-loss teams, but like what are their 3 losses?
Alabama's lost more recently. Alabama has lost worse.
It's tough. I'm glad I'm not the one who has to make the decisions. I only have to have opinions on it. But
Yeah, I mean, if I'm on the committee, I'm looking at if South Carolina takes down Clemson at Clemson in the last week of the year, right now, even with Alabama beating South Carolina earlier in the year, I'm still going to go off of the past several weeks and say South Carolina's been the better team. South Carolina gets the spot.
yeah, I agree. I that's how I would do it. That's where I'd be. We'll see. We'll see if they start making the jumps based on who's beating who when they're doing it, because they haven't done that so far. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's the only thing that I've seen is that it hasn't mattered how you've looked. I mean, Notre Dame blows out Army. They still aren't getting respect for that one yet. They ain't gonna.
Yeah.
They're gonna get. They're gonna get where they're gonna get, and it's the same thing for every other team. If and I mean, I know this might sound biased, and the only reason why I keep on bringing up the Notre Dame thing is just because I don't understand how Penn State is ranked ahead of Notre Dame, and it's been bothering the shit out of me.
Well, you know what we can do today? We can just throw up a prayer for the Terps and just hope the Terps do something magical in Happy Valley today.
I'm looking at that Maryland's plus 25, and I've looked at how Maryland's played all season. I know they're 1-7 in the Big Ten, and they've had a lot of lopsided losses, but 25 points is I don't even know if Penn State can honestly just put up like 20 in
25 on their own.
Yeah, it's just it's just not there. So I mean, they have put that number up before, but unanswered kind of stuff. Like you're asking for them to score like 35-38 and to win like 38-10. Like I don't like that. So I'm kind of leaning towards Maryland plus 25 here today.
I actually might do just a fun little Big Ten, well, maybe 2-pick parlay and do the Maryland and the Purdue spreads because those were both absolutely absurd. I think Purdue was. I think Purdue
29,
was,
if I recall.
Yeah, Purdue was getting 29 against Indiana today.
Indiana has blown out everyone except for Ohio State, and Purdue is really bad.
Well, I'll cook it up and see what it comes out to if you just put those two together.
Yeah, I'm feeling you there. You just had me. I had to look. I got 40 minutes for one more goal to happen for my soccer parlay to hit this. One of my 2 soccer parlays to hit this morning. So I might be off to a good start for some more late afternoon betting today.
Yeah, it never hurts. You just have a little action riding in the afternoon just to see.
Well, I did
Right,
my afternoon
plus 260.
My afternoon parlay, I did $20 and boosted it, or my 11 a.m. parlay, I should say. I did South Carolina plus 2.5, so I didn't do money line with it. I did Army minus 6.5 against Texas San Antonio. Did Kansas money line against Baylor. Duke minus 3.5 against Wake Forest, and Louisville minus 4 against Kentucky. So I felt really good about this. We'll see how good I feel about it by 12:30. I also put in some stuff for Notre Dame basketball today. Tough loss for them the other day and losing Marcus Byrne for the year. It's kind of great though. I had some Notre Dame basketball until like 2:30 in the morning while I was at work. I was so entertained.
Yeah, I've been trying to avoid I've been trying to avoid too much betting this week and enjoy the family time downtime. But Tweeth Mitchell got me in the other day on a couple and made a few bucks. So
Nice. All right. What else we got for this afternoon? Syracuse versus Miami. Interesting game. Just because it's Syracuse. One thing I won't do ever again is bet Syracuse. I'm done. I just can't do it because every single time I bet them, it blows up in my face. And every time that I don't bet them, they end up playing really freaking well. So today's one of those days because I don't like the U. I'm not gonna much really care for the game. I'm fully in on Notre Dame USC. That's the only thing I'm gonna pay attention to. That's the only thing I'm gonna care about come 2:30. My heart rate's going up just thinking and talking about it. But I would like to see Syracuse pull off the win against Miami. I believe it's SMU versus Miami right now, but there's the possibility of Clemson getting in with a Miami loss. And so if Clemson's in if Miami loses. So that would be, I would kind of like to see SMU versus Clemson overall. But, if Clemson loses to South Carolina today, it's one of those things again, like, ugh, Clemson gets in winning the ACC and they lost these 3 games. And it's just, these conference championships, man.
So here's the thing. Obviously, I'm in New York. I cannot touch this game. If I were to touch this game, I would be hitting the over and probably taking the Syracuse money line. Syracuse has scored at least 31 points in their last 5 games.
Okay. So after the Cal McCord 5 interception game, they got hot.
That was what against Pitt? That was
against Pitt.
Against Pitt, when they lost 41-13. Since then, they've put up 38, 31, 33, 31.
And the over 67.5 is what I'm seeing.
And they are 3-1 in those games.
Okay.
Their only loss was they lost 31-37 at Boston College.
And Boston College has been playing pretty good football. Boston College, another surprise if you're looking at spreads today. They're a -4 favorite against Pitt. Would not have seen that coming 4 weeks ago, but here we are. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know about how I feel about Miami in general. And I just really want Syracuse to just kind of take one over for us here today. Have Kyle McCord have his best game and have the Carrier Dome be rocking. I want it to be. I just don't want to see Miami in a playoff game. I don't want Miami in. I don't want them representing the ACC. And I think I would much rather see Clemson, no matter how they perform against South Carolina today. I just think I'd rather see Clemson because I'm just not into what Miami's all about.
Well, I mean, key victories. You got Syracuse took down Georgia Tech, UNLV, NC State, Virginia Tech. These are all decent wins on the resume.
Yeah, I mean, North Carolina State's been on the downside this year. They're 2-5, not really up to the standards that Dave Doran's kind of brought to that school. They're 2-5 inside conference, I should say. But yeah, Syracuse does have the ability. They're one of those schools that you're kind of like the Kansas State type deal. They're 8-3. They're 7-4 at this time of year. They're 8-3 right now, but it's like that's what they always are this time of year. And you get that game that kind of puts them into the top 25. That's who they've been for the last 5 years, I feel like.
They're 8-3. I mean, not three losses, not great.
Today.
3 losses, Stanford, Pittsburgh, and Boston College.
And Stanford's bad.
26-24, week 3.
Ugh. Yeah, not into it. And I would say that Miami's on upset alert. Another team that, just to look out for is Cal today with SMU, also at 2:30, both playing at the same time, trying to decide what that conference championship game is going to look like. Cal's not been great this year, but they've been in almost every single game. They literally lose games by 3-4 points. They're sticking with the term Bears and making sure they're in every game, just making sure they don't win it.
And tie into the last point, 2 weeks ago, Syracuse versus Cal, 33-25 Syracuse.
There you go.
Kyle McCord legacy game. Here we go.
Cal's kept it really close, and they're a team that I was honestly looking at for the spread today. I bet against SMU last week, and I do believe in SMU. Trust me, I do. I think they're the best team in the ACC. I want them to be in the playoff, but Cal's just been a tough team. They're a stingy team that stays inside football games, and That was a spread that I was looking at for that afternoon slate. But overall, I think the way that SMU has handled themselves, they're the only school ever to survive the death penalty, and they keep on proving it week in and week out. And honestly, I think it would be a great story for them to be the team that wins the ACC in their first year in the conference, to go out there and take it, be in the college football playoff.
Those jerseys, that whole color scheme, so crisp, so clean.
Yeah.
There's just something great about it to see when it's on your screen on a Saturday afternoon.
It just seems like football. It's got that feel. So I hope they take care of business, but it is a game. Like, don't be surprised if Cal is in it late and giving them a scare and honestly having a shot at messing things up for, the whole afternoon slate. As much as I don't want to say it, you got a shot with Notre Dame USC. That's a scary game. USC is a good football team that has led in every fourth quarter this season. They're 6-5. They've led in every fourth quarter. It's absolutely insane. They're another Chicago Bears type program. It's just what they do. But
do you know what that screams to me is? You have them on your card just about every single week in 2026 or 2025.
Yeah.
That screams that if they are 6-5, but they have played that way, is next year. That's a 9-10 win team.
And in the Big Ten, depending on your schedule, it's very possible to see how they roll through, and they could be in this college football conversation. As of right now, they would love nothing more than to put a damper in the dreams of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. This is obviously my game of the day. I know Texas A&M and Texas is the game of the day, but this is my game of the day because it just means so much to us, and it means so much to Notre Dame, and it's going to mean a lot to USC too, because they don't want us to be in there either. They want to take care of business. They're going to come out there fired up, especially where it's at. One gripe that I have: why is this not a night game? Like, why is this a 2:30? Like, it's a noon freaking start in California. Why is this not a night game? This deserves to be prime time.
Yeah, let's see.
CBS made the decision, so
that's why they don't know how to. They just don't know how to work TV.
Like, I think Texas and Texas A&M has more of an afternoon feel to it than Notre Dame USC at the Coliseum. That's a night game to me, and that's just how it's always been, and is what it is. But I think that it's going to end up working out in Notre Dame's favor more than it's going to work out in USC's. But whatever, it remains to be seen. But on to the point that was this game, Notre Dame USC. Huge college football implications. Big possible chance that there's an upset here because USC is a good school and they are a good team. And like I said, they've been in every freaking game. Like, they're there. Syracuse and Miami, another one. Really could change. The ACC has been pretty consistent this year, but how good is Miami? I don't think they're that great. Syracuse has a proven quarterback who has won, who can win. He does make a lot of mistakes too, but I think that he has enough. It's very possible Syracuse pulls it off. And then Cal is another team, just like USC, who keeps it close.
I have one additional counterpoint for you for your Syracuse-Miami pick and why it potentially becomes a trap game. They are a good team. They are 8-3. Miami can be concerning at times. Kyle McCord was shipped off to Syracuse from Ohio State because he was told he could not win a game like this.
Yeah, true. And so you're saying Michigan's upsetting Ohio State to shove it in their face, and then he's going to pull off the upset at Miami and say, who won the big game, bitch?
Yeah, I think that would be the most poetic of Kyle McCord legacy game. You told me I couldn't win this one.
You could just kind of see, like, when you say stuff like that, where our fandom kind of leans towards, just because there's those schools that that you love to hate. And Ohio State's one of them, and that's weird because people always say like us as Notre Dame fans, we should hate Michigan more. And it's like I don't like Michigan. It's just there's something more about Ohio State that I hate.
Yeah, Ohio State just ruins my day more to think about. That's all.
Yeah, basically. And I've seen Notre Dame beat Michigan plenty of times. So
if there was a way that they could both lose this game, that would be great. But if I have to pick one or the other, I would prefer that Ohio State just loses in morbid fashion.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. On the same page. Other than that, Arizona State and Arizona's at that time. We already talked about the Big 12 implications. In terms of our night slate, we do have the biggest game of the day, and there is some big implications in terms of what happens elsewhere, but we'll go into it. Texas versus Texas A&M. Texas A&M now number 20. The winner of this game goes to the SEC title game. So Texas A&M's whole season is on the line here tonight. After the last couple of weeks, they've lost 2 out of their last 3, one being to a team that we've highlighted a lot, South Carolina. And then last week they lost to Auburn, who has to play Alabama today. So interesting.
Honestly, I think Texas is going to roll through this one.
I'm kind of it is interesting to think about because Quinn Ewers is coming in this game with a high ankle sprain. So how long does he last? I'm surprised he's going because a high ankle sprain, that's not an easy injury. A lot of football players with high ankle sprains are not playing. I know quarterbacks tend to. I know Patrick Mahomes tends to, and people like that. But you have Arch Manning sitting there, and that's where it becomes interesting for me. Is like, does Ewers struggle early? Texas A&M is getting out to an early lead. Is it time for Arch Manning to come and help the team out because Quinn Ewers is just not capable with that high ankle sprain? There is things to watch that could make Texas A&M in this game. Big part of me too. Texas A&M lost last week because they were looking forward to this game.
Yep.
So I think they come out there and they're going to be ready. I've liked what Texas has done this year. Obviously, but that quarterback situation today is going to be interesting. And we know we've seen Arch Manning play this year. We know he's capable. We know he can lead this team downfield and get the win and do all that shit. Sure. But Texas A&M is going to come out there, and I think they're going to play a much better game than what a lot of people expect. It's going to be close. It's going to be as highlighted as people are making it out to be today.
No, I think it's going to be one of the best games in the late slate to watch, and obviously with the implications. I am just like you, curious to see how long is the leash for Quinn today.
Yeah,
I think that is the biggest question and concern from the Texas end. Is Arch is a very capable quarterback. He's already gone in there multiple times this year, led the drives in filling in for Quinn when he's gone. I just want to know how short the leash is of Quinn. You don't look right. I got to put Arch in.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is Quinn not looking great and they're down 14-0 and Arch has to lead them back to a victory? Like, that could be very tough. That could be It could be a very hard thing, and it could be something that exposes Texas in a way. And what happens here is Texas is in the college football playoff, win or lose. Like, they're in.
Yeah.
What happens here, though?
I agree. I think that's gonna. You just drew up the perfect scenario. Is if they go down early and he looks like he's struggling, just not even struggling, just hurt, moving around. How short is that leash before Sark needs to make the decision? All right, Arch is going.
Yeah, and
that
is that too late? You're asking a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not a matter of like the talent or anything like that. It's at what point is it the healthiest quarterback out there is what's going to win my game.
This is a tough place to play. I know that we've seen teams go in there and handle it. And that's the problem with what this leash might really end up being is just if you're coming into this game and it's 14-0, maybe it's still 3 minutes left, 4 minutes left in the first quarter, early in the second quarter, whatever it may be. How much harder is it because you're coming into this game with that crowd, this is your moment. Like, you're going to have to sit there and take over your team, and it's to decide if you go to the SEC title game or not. And Texas A&M needs it a lot more than you do. They need it a lot more than you do, because you're getting in. Like, I don't even know if Texas losing knocks them out from having a home game in the first round, because they would have to play a first round game. But would they still be at home? Probably. I don't know how that really shapes out. Depends on everything else. I mean, they love Penn State. They're not going to knock Notre Dame down if they win today. It's like, I mean, if all the teams that are there still win today, it's going to be interesting to see who Texas would end up playing if it all did play that way. But that's how this situation happens, is if Quinn Ewers is not up to par and he's just trying to give it a go because it's this game and it's the game that he wants and it's his team and he's just trying to show he's a grinder.
I mean, it also comes into play as what's too much before you hurt him.
Yeah. You don't want that either. You want both quarterbacks. You want the ability to have both.
You want the ability to have both, but also if you already know you're in one way, yes, the bye is awesome, right? Yeah, obviously that's awesome. But if you know you're in, is there a fine line between us playing, in 4 weeks? So I guess the fine line is there's us playing next week and Arch is our starter because Quinn is done for the year. And now because he got hurt, right? Or is it all right, forfeit on our end, technically, the Arch go in, damage control, just get us through this game. We'll saddle up again in 4 weeks as the number 5 seed hosting the 12, whatever.
Yeah. It's all very plausible to see and have happen. You could be right, and it could be Texas kind of running away with it, being the better team. I think they are the better team, but it's very plausible too that Texas A&M ends up winning this football game, and those scenarios do exist. It's an interesting thought to see where it goes. It's like, does Texas really want to play in the SEC title game? That's been questioned for the last couple of weeks, is who wants to play in these title games, because it is so jumbled up. A team like Texas A&M needs it. Like Georgia, they don't need it. Texas A&M beats Georgia next week. Georgia's probably not in. That could all happen. Next week, the SEC title game actually becomes winner in, loser out, but then there's going to be 4 other fucking SEC teams that are in there. Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be fun to watch and see how that breaks down. Obviously, we've already gotten into everything else in terms of the Big 12 slate, which that will be highlighted with the Iowa State game tonight versus Kansas State, which we already went into that. BYU versus Houston could end up mattering. The only other games that are in this late slate that are going to be implications, which might be more on the easier end. Indiana's playing Purdue. Purdue's not good. Indiana should steamroll them. For Ross's sake, hopefully not by 29, but I don't think I'm gonna
give me 28.
Yeah.
Give me 28.
And then Oregon versus Washington. It's a rivalry game. Washington's going to get up for it, but I think ultimately Oregon stays undefeated in this one, and we most likely go ahead and look forward to what will be the game of the week next week in Oregon versus Ohio State, a game where winner's the Big Ten champ, and gets a first round bye. The other one is probably a 5 seed, a 6 seed. I don't know if they knock Ohio State down further, being a 5 right now. And I think, what are they, ranked number 2 still? Are they actually ranked number 2 and Texas is ranked 3, or is it the other way around? Yeah, Ohio State's 2, Texas is 3. So how far does Ohio State fall with another loss to Oregon? Possibly. That would be interesting to see. But most likely that's what we're seeing is Oregon versus Ohio State next week for the second time. Might even see it for a third time then eventually. So see who wins the ones that matter. Outside of that, you got any surprise picks?
I was going through my card. I don't think I went anything nuts really today. Not really. I'm looking. I kept it pretty basic, nice. Nothing too crazy really happening. The only one really out there is the South Carolina over Clemson.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that's too far fetched because I'm kind of in the same thought process that they're going to take that game down. Um,
The only trap I would bet, I cannot bet because we're in New York, and that would be I would be taking the over in Syracuse money line today, but can't do that one. So
yeah, I'm not going to bet Syracuse because they cost me too much money, but I do think it's a possibility. It's going to be a close game late, like we've already stated. It's going to be interesting to see how this all works out today. And those conference championship games, all those are going to be decided for the most part today. There's nothing that's truly locked in except for I think it was like the AAC was the only one. I think we got Army versus Tulane or something, or I forget who they got. Army's in a championship game against somebody.
I think Army might be on bye.
Yeah, I know that they're in the championship game next week though. That's the only conference championship that was clinched in terms of who's playing who.
Yeah.
Every other conference championship game is going to be decided today. The most complicated being that Big 12 situation, but other than that, we're about a half hour away from the day starting off, and this 11 a.m. slate. Hopefully, things get crazy instantly. We'll be going on Twitter all day, so follow us on there. We'll be back again next week and try to break down even more probably confusion than what we're already seeing.
Crack 'em, lock 'em. Everyone have a good bet day.
All right, everyone have a good one. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you later.